Hey there, so today we're going to be taking a look at 5 different titles from 2023 running on the Beelink SER5 mini PC. This is the SRE5 Max with the Ryzen 7 5800H. That is running at 54 watts. So plenty of juice for the iGPU and plenty of juice for all of those 8 CPU cores. But really, we are going to be limited by that iGPU far quicker before the CPU ever becomes a problem. So let's see what this, at this point, aging Vega-based iGPU can really do in 2023. Now, first on the 2023 games list is Starfield, which is probably my biggest letdown of the year. I was pretty hyped for a brand new Bethesda game, but unfortunately this ended up being a lot more of a chore to play than actually enjoyable, mostly due to the focus on just these really wide empty areas that kind of just don't have anything interesting to do in them. In general, the game just feels pretty outdated, and unfortunately, even though visually speaking it doesn't look amazing, it doesn't exactly perform that well either. Now here we are using FSR at its lowest possible setting, pretty much 50% resolution, and of course we do have all of the lowest in-game graphics settings, and we're barely breaking a 30 FPS average with 1% lows that very consistently are going to dip down into, depending on certain areas, the single digit range. In general, you're pretty much fighting the game itself just to try to play it, and visually speaking it doesn't look amazing. So all around a rough start for looking at the titles that have come out this year. Now, going from one of my biggest disappointments to one of my biggest surprises, here we have Lies of P, a very Bloodborne-inspired title that came from a Korean developer previously known for making essentially free-to-play MMOs. So the fact that this came out and it is good of a performer as it is. Now, keep in mind, what you're seeing on the screen is an FPS average of 42, but 1% lows that dip down into the 20s. Look at those frame time charts. Those spikes there are letting you know how frequently you are dipping down into those 1% lows, and it doesn't feel incredible. There really seems to be some sort of issue going on here. I messed around with different settings, setting it to all of the different graphics presets, just trying to figure out why it was doing this. This was consistently happening. Now maybe we just need a driver update to potentially fix this. It really seems like Vega has been getting left behind in terms of driver updates. But if those 1% low issues can be resolved, this would be a actually really nice gaming experience. Now, another game that I was kind of anticipating that did not exactly end up living up to the hype is Payday 3. After playing it for a bit, it really feels more like a Payday 2.5 more than a whole brand new installment, especially with the very limited content that there is right now. Now, even FSR couldn't really make this a very enjoyable experience just because those 1% lows dipping into the low 20s felt pretty brutal, especially since our FPS average being just above 30 is already kind of teetering on the edge of playability. In general, an overall disappointing showing yet again. Now, Amnesia: The Bunker also released this year, and it was an interesting release because at least the version that I can get on the Game Pass runs on OpenGL, and it doesn't really support any upscaling or anything like that, none of these really new features. In general, visually speaking, it doesn't look incredible. It performs decently enough, though it still struggles with certain 1% low issues. Again, not 100% sure what causing that. I have restarted the system multiple times, and these were still consistent problems that were showing up. I'm really hoping that AMD releases a new driver soon. I might actually start reverting to even older drivers just to test out to see if there's anything weird happening here. But in general, this is one of those games where I feel like for the most part it's going to be playable. Just expect certain issues here and there. But in comparison to the other titles, this felt a lot more enjoyable to actually play. I also did try Forza Motorsport 2013, of course with the graphic settings all set to auto since it really wants to just do everything automatically. And it pretty much just sets everything to its lowest setting, and we are using FSR at the ultra performance preset, and this was still not enough to actually salvage the game in any way. So in general, an overall very rough showing here. Now, the last game that I wanted to take a look at was also one that kind of surprised me. Here we have Assassin's Creed Mirage. running with the lowest in-game graphics settings, and we are using FSR at the performance preset. And while the 1% lows, again, do not look remarkable, the FPS average is pretty nice. And if you look at those frame times, they look a lot better than some of the other titles did. This legitimately feels better to play than some of the other games that we saw on this list here. And I'm pretty impressed considering that it is the most recent title to come out. Now, obviously, visually, we've had to sacrifice a lot, and it doesn't necessarily look great, but it does perform. And that's actually pretty surprising. So what do we learn from all of this here? Well, the Ryzen 7 5800H and its Vega-based Radeon 8 iGPU are really starting to struggle with these brand new titles. You did see that we got very close to getting essentially 30 FPS average in a lot of these titles, but the 1% lows are really what let us down. And this was already with using FSR in sometimes its most aggressive setting. And even this was not enough to salvage the overall performance. Now, the CPU portion of the Ryzen 7 5800H is still incredible performance to this day, especially at the price point that it's at. But that iGPU, while being essentially the best experience you could possibly have with Vega, is at the end of the day still Vega. Unfortunately, in the current market right now, you're looking at spending an extra $150 to $200 if you actually want to see a meaningful upgrade in terms of iGPU performance. Mini PCs with the 6600H and 6600U never really fully materialized and have dried up on the market. For example, the SRE6 non-max with the Ryzen 5 6600H is practically impossible to find now, essentially being replaced by the SRE5 Max. But of course, that actually came with a downgrade in the iGPU. So it's a tough spot if you're really looking to play brand new titles. But as you've seen from some of the other testing that I've done with this system, there are still a lot of really popular titles that it does an incredible job in. So it's definitely something to think about. Well, I'll catch you guys in the next one.